Hello, you gorgeous humans, and welcome back to Your Power. I am so excited to have you here as always. Before I get started, if you are watching this in the video version, whether that is on Spotify or on YouTube, I'm just going to address this big wet mark on my top. As you can see, I am fresh, glowing. I have just done my skincare and I spilt some of it on my top. But I am in a rush today. I have lots of things on the to-do list, so waiting until my top dries is not an option, and changing my top is not an option because I have been house sitting the last week, and today is the last day and I have run out of clothes. So I'm sure you'll gradually see this dry up as the episode goes on. If you are listening to the audio version, then just completely ignore the last couple of minutes of what I've just said. Anyway, welcome back. I am so excited to have you here. And if you listened to the last episode, you would know that I planned for this episode to be a little bit of a life update, but more of a storytelling episode. I'm going to tell you the story of how my nervous system led me home. For those of you who may not be aware, in September this year, I formally and officially decided to pack up my life in Melbourne and bring myself back to my hometown. And I wanted to sit down with you and tell you the story of how that all came to be and a little bit of a lesson. Actually, it's a massive lesson, probably the biggest lesson that you will see and biggest example you will see of how your nervous system tells you exactly what you need to know, because understanding my nervous system and understanding the cues of my nervous system was the reason that I came home. So I'm going to take you back to about July, August 2023. That's where we're going to begin. Now, it was in around June, July, August that my mental health started declining rapidly. This is where I can kind of go back and pinpoint where I could see that I was really declining. And it's funny because people who have listened to the podcast from back then and the, most recent episodes before this one and the last one, people have said to me how they have noticed the energy in my voice back then and the, flatness of what I was and how I was feeling. And going back in hindsight, I can really, really see how low I was. I recently said to my mum, I didn't realize how low and how depressed I was until I, am now out of it and I was looking at it in hindsight. So it was around June, July that I really started to go downhill with my mental health. There were a lot of factors that played into this. First of all, Melbourne winter. No, I'm not even kidding. I feel like I get seasonal depression really, really bad. I'm not good in the cold. I'm not good in seasons where I don't have the sun shining on my face, and Melbourne especially is very, very miserable around that time of year. So that was probably one of the smaller reasons as to why I was feeling that way. However, probably the biggest reason that I was feeling the way that I was feeling around that time was because for the 12 months prior to that, I had been navigating the separation of my parents. So my parents officially separated in June of 2022. And of course, you have to be separated for 12 months before you get divorced. So for the 12 months that they were separated, I feel as though I was navigating quite a lot. And the most that I was navigating and the hardest thing that I was navigating was what I was learning about myself. I was starting to see behaviors and I was starting to see things come to the surface in that separation, and it got really, really difficult. I learnt a lot about myself. I learnt a lot of things about myself that I could see mirrored to me in this separation, and that was really, really hard for me. I also was forced to dive deeper into the way that I was raised and a lot of things that I experienced growing up where I hadn't yet processed and I hadn't yet allowed myself to acknowledge those things. And so for the 12 months that this was going on, I was doing the work. I was deep in the work, and I was deep in the understanding of myself and deep in the rewiring of behaviors and patterns and things that I could see I was playing out, where these things within myself were mirrored back to me so strongly over this 12 months that I was put into a lot of shame around the way that I would behave around certain things and the way that I expressed certain things. I know that I am being a little bit vague in what I'm saying, but my parents' separation is obviously something that is personal to them. It's not really my place to share that, but this is probably what I can attribute the most of the way that I was feeling to, in terms of all of the work that I was doing within myself and all of the awareness that I was building around who I was, the way I was raised, what I have experienced, and most importantly, my desire to change a lot about myself due to what was being mirrored in this separation. I had also been navigating the breakdown of my own relationship, and that's something that I've navigated for a really long time. I know I have briefly mentioned it on the podcast before, but I feel as though, as I was seeing what I was seeing play out, it also showed me a lot about the way that I had navigated my relationship in the past. And so that was really hard for me to see, because there's elements of responsibility that I needed to take for the breakdown of my relationship, and that was really hard as well. In all of this, there was a sense of losing a lot of people as well, and losing people that were really prominent in my life, and things just were really messy. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Things were really messy, and it was hard. In hindsight as well, now that I'm here and I can look back at the way that I was feeling, I was really struggling with all of my family not being around. This was one of the ways in which I, went into complete independent woman mode. I was convincing everyone that I was looking after myself and I could get through things on my own and process things on my own. There was no family around, all of my family is from New South Wales. And so I didn't rely on any of my family members. I didn't reach out to any of my family members. I didn't allow anyone the opportunity to support me. And so I completely isolated myself from not only my immediate family, but my extended family as well. And then the divorce was finalized in June, and my parents had moved on with their lives. And that was really hard for me to witness. And I felt a little bit left behind. I was still in the depth of processing a lot of things that had happened over the 12 months prior to that. This is really hard to talk about because I want to respect both of my parents, but it was really fucking hard. It was really hard, and I felt like no one really cared about how hard it was for me. And I have taken a lot of responsibility in terms of the way that I isolated myself and the way that I didn't really reach out to anyone, and the way that I kind of stepped into an independent woman type vibe and tried to look after myself. But no one really asked me how I was feeling. Throughout this whole process, I felt as though I was doing a lot in pushing the way that I felt aside, or my opinion aside, or my boundaries aside, because I wanted to prioritize how others involved were feeling. And I wanted to make sure that everyone was happy and everyone was doing okay. And I didn't realize in the process that I had completely abandoned honoring how I felt. I had completely abandoned myself, and in doing so, I also felt completely abandoned by everyone else. I knew this episode was going to be hard to record, but I thought I'd last more than 5 minutes. So, because of the way that I had shown up for the 12 or so months prior to this timeline, in, you know, looking after myself, and I was doing all of the work on myself, and I was doing all of, you know, the processing and the healing and all of the things, and I feel like during that time, I'd actually just forgotten to be sad. I'd actually just not allowed myself to be sad. And so when that sadness inevitably came, I felt completely alone in it. And I was angry, and I was resentful. I was angry that no one asked me if I was okay, but then I also didn't let on that I wasn't. I was angry that no one checked in, but I also never reached out. And I can say all of that now in hindsight, and I can take responsibility for my part in it. But it hit a stage where I hadn't heard from any of my extended family. I couldn't remember the last time my parents asked me if I was okay. And I just felt so alone. And I feel like, oh my God. And I feel like, you know, there was one event that happened, and when that event happened, it broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart. And that was the thing that just knocked me for 6. You know, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And when this event happened, I was really angry, and I was, you know, really angry at everyone. And that was when it really went downhill. So that was in June. When this happened, I really isolated myself. And this is absolutely not to say that I didn't have friends who were supportive. I definitely had friends that I, you know, was able to talk to, but I isolated myself from pretty much everyone else, from other than a handful of friends. And it was during this time that the dysregulation of my body was so bad that I just couldn't function. And so what I decided to do from this moment, and the steps that I decided to take to allow myself to move through this, was to really just focus on healing my nervous system and slowing down and feeling the sadness. And I did. And as so happens, when you begin to heal your nervous system, when you begin to show it that slowing down is safe, your nervous system will completely shut down. The moment you show it that it's okay to slow and it's okay to become still, it will completely shut down to start restoration. And because my nervous system was so heightened and so dysregulated for so long, so too needed to be the restoration phase. So from the start of June to I don't even know when, I couldn't even get off the couch. I was doing the bare minimum. I was spending my days laying down. I couldn't move my body. I was crying constantly. I was so emotional, and I was really depressed. And that is the lowest that I have ever felt in my life. And it really scared me how low I got. It was really scary how low I got. But I still navigated it on my own. I thought that was the best way through it. I also felt a sense of my family was already going through so much, you know, and I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. I've felt like a burden for most of my life. So it's a big narrative that plays out for me in not wanting to be a burden on anyone. So that was something that played out in the way that I didn't reach out to anyone. Then it was the first weekend of August, and I got a phone call from my mum, and she basically said that she was in our hometown and that I needed to get on the next flight because it looked like my nan wasn't going to make it through the weekend. And my nan had been unwell for about 12 to 14 months at this point. She was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and we had been going back every couple of months to come and see her. I believe I had a trip planned a couple of weeks later, and that was why mum called and basically said that I needed to get on a plane that weekend. So I think I left 2 days later. I had an event that night, and I think I booked a flight for the following day. I got up to my hometown, and my brother and his partner were already here, and my mum was here. And I got to my nan's house, and she wasn't well. However, since the call from my mum, I think the nurses had said that it was very unlikely that she would make it through the weekend. And I think I got there on Monday morning, and she had picked up a bit from there. So she was doing a lot better than when my mum called. However, it was still a bit touch and go. So I got there, I just booked a one-way flight, and basically we'd spent a couple of days there. She was still, we were still a bit unsure of, what the future looked like for her and how long we had left with her. And I believe it got to the Wednesday where I basically said to my mum and my auntie, this is why I have my own business. This is why I've created the flexibility that I have. I'm going to go home. I'm going to put the dogs in the car, and I'm going to drive back, and I'll stay here indefinitely. So I did that. And between my mum, my auntie, and I, we spent the next few weeks caring for my nan. She basically just needed someone full-time to look after her. She was not well. She needed help doing everything. And we did that. And after a few weeks, it was probably about 5 weeks, I would say, she seemed to be a lot more stable. She seemed to be starting to be able to do things for herself again. She, was getting more life back into her. And we kind of made the decision at that point that mum would go home for a little while, take a break, go to work and spend some time in her own life for a little while. And it was suggested that I do the same. And I found myself not wanting to do that. I found myself really looking for reasons to continue staying here. I think at that point, one of our really good family friends, one of my mum's really good friends, he was going to Thailand for a week and a half, and so I went and house sat his house. I went and stayed with my auntie and uncle for a little while, and then eventually I was kind of like house hopping and decided that it was probably time that I go home. Again, I just had this feeling of being a burden on people, so I just decided that it was time to go home. Now, during this time, I had reconnected with my family. I'd reconnected with my friends that live here. We would kind of take shifts with Nan and spend the morning going for walks by the beach, or, I would go for dinner with my family and with my friends, and I started to kind of get into a nice routine. And especially when I was house sitting for our family friend, he lived right near the beach. So every morning I was doing a beach walk, and the weather was always beautiful. And again, I was seeing my family again. And in particular, I reconnected with my auntie and uncle and my 2 cousins. And one night I went over for dinner at their house, and for the very first time spoke up about how I'd been feeling at home and told them about situations that had happened, and was really validated for the way that I'd been feeling. And I needed that more than I ever realized I needed it. And so over the weeks that I was here, I was spending a lot of time with my auntie and uncle and my cousins. And I remember sitting at the bench with my auntie and uncle sitting at the kitchen. And, you know, because I had been so unhappy in Melbourne previously, it was always kind of on my mind to move out of Melbourne. My plan was to go to Perth, right? The furthest place away possible that I could isolate myself from everyone. In hindsight, I realized that was what I was wanting to do. You know, my idea was starting over and being an independent woman, but in reality, it was to further isolate myself and to protect myself from more hurt from people that were around me. And I remember this one moment sitting at the kitchen with my auntie and uncle, and my auntie said, "Would you ever consider moving back here?" And I said, "You know what? I thought that I wanted to move to Perth. I thought that I wanted to move far away. But I think what I really need is to be at home with family." And that was kind of the moment that I first even considered doing this, first even considered coming back home. I feel like there was such a stigma in my mind that moving back home to my hometown would be such a step backwards. And in hindsight, it's, you know, something that I feel like was planted by my dad for a lot of years, that this place was, you know, a step backwards in life, and you know, you needed to move away from here to have a good life and build a good life. And it was like, in my mind, I had gone from, you know, I was in Melbourne, I was in the big city, I was in a place with so much opportunity, and coming back here would be me admitting defeat. But I realized that I haven't been around family for most of my life. And that was what I needed more than anything in the world. And I didn't realize that until I had allowed myself to be with family. And so, anyway, I think it was the start of September at this point, and I just needed to go home. You know, there was no place for me here anymore. There was no need for me here anymore, and I was dreading it. I remember sitting on the couch with my auntie and uncle, just saying how much I was dreading it, and saying how little I was looking forward to it. And I was talking to my auntie and my nan, and I remember my nan saying, like, "You just need to suck it up." And I got so upset, but you know, that was my only option, that was my only choice. And my auntie, you know, kept saying to me, my Auntie Ali kept saying to me, like, "I wish there was something we could do. I wish I could help you." And at this point, I was still not asking anyone to help me. I was still not saying to anyone, "I need your help, like, I need you to help me." I still just wasn't allowing anyone to help me. I just sucked it up and I went home. I drove home on the Thursday. I walked into my house, and I cannot even explain to you what my body felt walking into that house. I immediately felt more dysregulated than I had felt in the 5 weeks prior. It was like my body had this cellular memory of everything that I was going through in that house and all of the ways in which that house dysregulated me. And it just instantly threw me all of these warning signs to not be in that house. I walked in and it was late at night, and my fridge had broken, my air conditioning wasn't working, my split system wasn't working, so my heater wasn't working, and it was like so cold, and it was pouring down rain, and my house just felt so foreign to me. And I went to bed that night and I just knew that I wasn't meant to be there anymore. So I got up the next morning and I went and I decided to just really try and make the most of being there, right? So I had, I looked up before I left, I started like a new meal plan, and I really just wanted to get my life back on track. And I was just doing all of these things, and I re-signed up to the gym, and I, took my membership off pause, and I had this meal plan idea, and I was in the middle of Aldi and I had a full shopping cart, and I had the biggest breakdown in the middle of Aldi. I abandoned my cart. I was, in the aisle, just like tears streaming. And I just sent my auntie a message. I forgot what I even sent her. And she called me, and I was just in a state. I was just a wreck. I remember I was sitting in my office and it was pouring down rain. It was so miserable. I was just broken. I was on the floor crying, and she left work. She got in the car, picked up my cousin, and the two of them drove down from New South Wales that day to come and get me and take me back. And I will never, ever be able to put into words what that did for me. For my auntie to hear how broken I was and the state that I was in, for her to get in the car and drive 10 hours that moment to pick me up, put some things in a bag, put the dogs in the car, and take me back home. It just made me realize that how much I had just downplayed how vulnerable I was and how scared I was and how sad I was. I couldn't believe that someone would do that for me, So waiting for my auntie that day, I spent the day with my mum and my brother, and I opened up to them and I told them how I'd been feeling as well, and they both came over, and it was like I'd finally just allowed myself to ask for help, and I allowed people to show up for me, and my life changed in that moment. We came back to New South Wales, and it was like I just felt in my body that I was home and I was safe and I was calm and I was regulated just being here. And I realized how much it healed my nervous system, that 5 weeks being here. How every element of what I did in that 5 weeks healed everything that my nervous system needed. The sun and the slowness and the love that I got from my family, and allowing myself to be surrounded by people and taking walks and moving my body and being at home, being by the water. There were just so many things that led to the healing of my nervous system. And it wasn't until I took myself out of that and back in a place where my body just couldn't handle being that I realized that I needed to come home. I needed to be here, and my nervous system was telling me that all along. So we drove back, and my auntie said to me, you can stay for a week, you can stay for a month, you can stay for a year. It doesn't matter. You just need to tell us what you need. And so I stayed there for a couple of weeks. And this whole time in my head, I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted to come back, but I had nowhere to stay. I couldn't rent a house. These few months that I was navigating from June to now September, I couldn't run my business. I couldn't be in my business. And so I was struggling financially. I had taken out this huge business loan at the start of the year, and I was falling behind on it. And I had so much debt accumulating, and it was like I had just fallen into this pit, and I couldn't run my business in this state. I couldn't run my business the way that I was running myself. I couldn't even run myself. I was not in a financial position to be able to just come back and rent somewhere. And so I was here for weeks. I think it was about 2 weeks when I finally just said to myself, just ask if you can stay. And I realized in this moment how long I had told myself that I was a burden, and I had been made to feel like I was a burden, and how scared I was to actually put myself in a position where I could potentially burden someone. And we were sitting in Guzman y Gomez, I remember, and I asked if I could move in. I asked if I could stay. And my auntie's response was, of course you can. And in that moment, I finally felt like I had life to look forward to again. I'm sorry, I swear I didn't plan on spending this whole episode crying. So my cousin and I, we got on a plane, we went and packed up my house, we put it all in storage, we got my car, and we drove home. And that was at the end of September. And in the months since, I have never felt more myself. I have never been happier. I have never felt so full of life than I do right now. And I'm still healing. I still have a lot that I'm navigating. I still have a lot that I am processing, and I have so much healing to do still. But these last few months, I have just been able to find myself again, and I have fallen back in love with my life. I've fallen back in love with myself. I'm creating a life for myself here, and I'm, for the first time in a really long time, content. I'm happy. I'm content. I feel safe, and I'm regulated. Since moving back here and making that decision, I feel just so safe in myself. My skin is clearing up. I am putting on weight because I'm eating properly. I have my appetite back. I still have a lot that I'm navigating in terms of, raising these standards for myself and losing people in the process. There's always, of course, this sadness of what moving here meant for me in terms of the chapters that I have closed, but it was the best decision that I have ever made for myself. So where to from here? I am still living with my auntie and uncle and my cousins, and that has healed so much in me that I didn't realize needed to be healed. It has just been so powerful for the repair of my heart living with them. They're my best friends, and they have done so much for me. Yeah, living there has just been such a powerful experience that I needed more than anything else in the world. So I'm still living with them. I am enrolled at the University of Wollongong this year. Oh my God, it's 2024 now. I'm enrolled to go back to uni at UOW. I start in February. I will be studying neuroscience and psychological science because I have big plans in terms of this business, and what I see from my experience is going to be so fucking powerful in the direction that I take this business. I feel like this year I'm really anchoring into this big picture. I have a big picture vision for the first time in a really long time of what I want to do and what I want to create. And I'm really making moves on that. There's a very big community element in what I am about to do, and a community element that I'm fucking excited about because of the community that I am now in. I am connecting with people so deeply here because I am such a powerful and strong version of myself here. I'm connecting with just such beautiful humans, whether that be my friends that I already knew and I have known for 20 years and creating this new level of depth with them, or connecting with people that I have known recently and being able to connect to a new level of depth with them because of the human that I am for myself now. Moving here has brought up so much within me that I didn't realize that I needed to heal until I saw those parts of me healing because I am here. And I truly, truly believe that my nan knew exactly what she was doing. We moved my stuff back here I think we arrived on the Saturday night, and I got a phone call from my nan on the Sunday morning asking me to come over. I went over that morning and she had turned for the worst, and my auntie came over that afternoon. We were all sitting in the lounge room that afternoon with nan, and we were talking about the move back and how all of my stuff was back, and I put everything in storage, and my nan turns to me and goes, "So is everything okay now?" And I said to her, "Yeah, Nan, everything's okay." And she passed away 2 days later. So I absolutely like to think that my nan got me here for a reason. My nan brought me here knowing exactly what I needed. She knew exactly what she was doing. So that is my story. That is my story of one of the biggest self-trust and trusting in what my nervous system was trying to tell me moments. I moved home because I knew what I was feeling in my body. I knew what my nervous system was telling me. And I am so fucking proud of the trust that I had in my nervous system and the trust that I had in myself to be able to read my nervous system and know exactly what it needed, because it changed my life. It saved my life. It completely saved my life. And that is why I am more passionate about this work now than I ever have been before. because it doesn't just change lives, it saves lives. I wanted to reintroduce something into the episode because of a lot of feedback that I got when I used to do this. So I am going to reintroduce reading an essay from 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think by Brianna West. And the essay that I've chosen today is very aligned to a conversation that I was having in the last podcast episode. I got so much feedback from the last podcast episode around what I shared in terms of my insecurities. And so the essay that I'm going to share with you today is called The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem: Why It Is Not How You Feel, but What You Think You're Capable of. We tend to think of self-esteem as a static thing, a state in which your mind naturally fuels you with positive, supportive thoughts, never being too deeply influenced by any doubts or dislikes. This, however, is where the fine line between self-esteem and self-aggrandizement blurs. In the words of Anna Deavere Smith, self-esteem is what really gives us a feeling of well-being. It's the very inherent sense that everything's going to be all right because we are capable of making it all right. Self-esteem is knowing that we can determine our own course and that we can travel that course. It's not that we travel the course alone, but we need the feeling of agency. That if everything were to fall apart, we could find a way to put things back together again. Self-esteem is not how much confidence you have in how well people perceive you, but how much confidence you have in whether or not you can manage your life. What's interesting about having self-esteem is that it eliminates the need to focus on how we're superior to others. When we don't feel we're actually in control of our lives or aren't happy with how things are going so far, we often focus on how much better things are than someone else to placate the feeling of failure. Nathaniel Branden outlined what exactly it takes to build a healthy sense of self. He notes, particularly, that people either take the feel-good approach, I am beautiful, I am rich, I am successful, which is merely a substitute for the real thing, or they build it in a genuine way. He says that the two fundamental elements self-esteem boils down to are self-efficacy, which is a sense of basic self-confidence in the face of life's challenges, and self-respect, a sense of being worthy of happiness. Self-esteem is not an emotion which fluctuates from moment to moment, but a continuing disposition to experience a sense of efficacy and respect for oneself. Thus, it is something which is built over a long period of time, not just wished into existence. It is reality-based. Undeserved praise, whether it comes from oneself or others, will not provide it. Here are the 6 practices or pillars on which Branden argues self-esteem can be built. They prove that it is not just a choice to feel confident in yourself, but many choices made continuously and with as much effort as possible. Pillar number 1, living consciously. To live consciously is not to be controlled by your subconscious biases and desires. Your shadow selves, as they are called, are out in the light. You understand what's going on around you, and you can make informed choices based on that inherent understanding. Number 2 is self-acceptance. You aren't aggrandizing your looks or your intelligence or being willfully ignorant of the natural balance of traits and characteristics every person possesses. This is true self-acceptance. It is seeing your whole self without judging or condemning parts of it. Number 3, self-responsibility. You hold yourself accountable for your own happiness. You understand the phrase, it may not be your fault, but it is still your problem. You are in control of your life because you are not letting other things do it for you. Number 4 is self-assertiveness. You can stand up for yourself without being defensive. Defensiveness is born of fear. Assertiveness is born of confidence. Number 5, live purposefully. You live mindfully and intentionally. You recognize that your purpose is just to be where you are, doing whatever you're doing. In this, you infuse your days with a sense of purposefulness, as it is something you choose, not wait to find or have created for you. And number 6 is personal integrity. You hold yourself to a certain standard of morals and ethics and accountability. You develop a code of conduct for yourself, rather than just abiding by the one that you were conditioned to. You are able to look at choices objectively, even when the circumstances are difficult. You realize the importance of the phrase, "The road to hell was paved with good intentions." I was incredibly surprised to find that I have 12 reviews on Spotify, which is really fucking cool. And I think I have like 5 or 6 on Apple. So I have a favor to ask you. If you enjoy this podcast, if you enjoy this episode, please follow and subscribe on whatever platform you choose to watch this or listen to this on. And if you could do me the beautiful favor of leaving a review, that would be ever so much appreciated. Thank you for listening to this episode or watching this episode, however you consumed it. I am so excited to be in your ears next week. Have a beautiful week ahead. Love you, bye.